Marxist theories of culture. These are the topics that we shall discuss. Marxism, basic introduction, classical Marxism, base and superstructure model, ideology, hegemony, RSA and ISA, late capitalism, and Marxist theory of culture. Basic introduction. Now, theories of classical Marxism are based on the theories developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Hegel's influence. Hegel's theory of dialectic has an enormous influence on Marx's dialectic materialism. Now, what is theory of dialectic? An interpretive method in which contradiction between a proposition and its antithesis is resolved at a high level of truth. That is synthesis. So, if you think about an argument, then an argument is thesis and the counter argument is antithesis, and it would resolve at some point, and this is called synthesis, the combination of two. Now, Marx's dialectic materialism, which is quite akin to the structure of dialectic, according to Marx, history is a process of development through conflict, not of ideas, but real conflict between economic classes. Like Hegel's dialectic, that there is always thesis and antithesis. According to Marx, in history is a process where you have conflicts, and these conflicts would create history. That is dialectic materialism. Now, these are some of the important books of classical Marxism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the Communist Manifesto, which was published in 1848. Karl Marx is a contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, which was published in 1859, and Karl Marx's Das Kapital or The Capital, a Critique of Political Economy, which came out in 1867. Commodities. Now, let us talk about some of the important terms related to classical Marxism. Commodities. Now, commodities are basically the products of human skill and labor. They use value. The way you can use a commodity. Now, exchange value, basically the market value. So, a commodity would have two values. The first one is use value, the way you use it, consume it, and the second one is exchange value, basically the market value. Mode of production, another important term related to classical Marxism. Now, mode of production would be constituted of two fragments, two things. The first one is productive forces. Productive forces are human labor and means of production. Means of production would refer to industries and warehouses and the machines and all this, and then human labor. And relations of production, basically this term would refer to the market. Now, Marxist, according to history of society, is determined by the exchanging mode of production. It generates new class structures. So each mode of production, each structure would create new class structures, and class structures basically are constituted of two groups, two antagonistic groups to be particular: exploiter and the exploited. Clearly, the people who owns the means of production would be the exploiter, and labor class are the exploited ones. Now, types of society. In feudalism, which is clearly an agrarian society, where you have kings, lords, serfs, ruling class would basically own the lands, and peasants and serfs are basically laborers. In capitalist society, bourgeois would be the class who would own the means of production, and proletariat are basically who produce goods and services. We are quite familiar with these two terms, bourgeois and proletariat. So bourgeois are basically the industrialists or the people who own the means of production, who own the industries, farmhouses and lands, and proletariat, the labor sections, the people who produce goods and services. In socialist society, there is no private property. So private property in socialist society would be replaced by cooperative ownership, where there would not be one single individual who would own a means of production. Rather, it would be a group of people, the cooperative society, who would own the means of production. and the production and the profit would be distributed among its members. So, based on superstructure model, Karl Marx, in a preface to a contribution to the critique of political economy, had developed this structure. According to him, that the base of the society is basically the economic base. Where you have relations of production and means of production and relations of productions, these would constitute the base of a society, which is the economic base. And based on this base, the uh, hierarchy or the superstructure would be built. So in base we have relations of production and means of production. So means of production would refer to the industries, farms, lands, and all these, and obviously labors as well. And relations of production, basically the market. uh, and based on this base, the superstructure is built, and the superstructure would constitute uh, things like education, family, religion, politics, culture, mass media, and all that. So base of society would be constituted of certain forces and relations of production, and superstructure comprises of laws, customs, religion, education, government, and other cultural institutions which depend on the base, on the economic base. Now, another important term related to Marxism is ideology. Now, what is ideology? In general, uh, we know that ideology would refer to a set of ideas, beliefs, values that are validated as truths and determine the way we perceive and relate the world. But in Marxist terminology, ideology would mean something else. In Marxist terminology, ideology would refer to the false consciousness. The term was coined by Friedrich Engels. Now, what is false consciousness? Now, let us try to understand what is ideology and how it is produced first. So, capitalist or privileged sections impose and normalize the social and economic orders for their own profits. To maintain the hierarchy, the privileged section or the capitalists or the industry owners or the people who own the means of production, they would try to legitimize certain norms and orders in the society for their own profits. Now, people would accept those existing social and economic orders as normative orders. They would accept it. Now, exploitation of the class is justified through this discourse. So, some order is established and it is normalized because people would accept that as the normative orders. And because of this normative order, the exploitation is legitimized. Now, class system is rigidified by this discourse, you can say. Now, people are unable to see things, especially exploitation, oppressions, and social relations, as they really are, for they accepted this discourse as established order. This discourse is defined as false consciousness or ideology. So, what is ideology? False consciousness or ideology is a term used by some to describe the ways in which material, ideological, and institutional processes are said to mislead members of the proletariat and other class actors within the capitalist societies, concealing the exploitation intrinsic to the social relations between the classes. So let us move on. Marx's theory of alienation. Karl Marx's theory of alienation describes the social alienation, the estrangement, describe the social alienation of people from the aspects of the human nature as a consequence of living in a society of stratified social class. So, so when the people would start to compromise regarding their basic needs, it would be kind of alienation, because and this alienation happens because one section is privileged and another section is deprived of something, and one section is exploited and another section is exploited. So hegemony. Now, what is hegemony? Now, hegemony basically means dominance over someone. Now, this term was coined by Antonio Gramsci. uh, Capitalism, according to Gramsci, maintained control not just through violence or political and economic coercion, but also through ideology. Ideology is a way to establish a set of norms and to set dominance over the people. Suppose, think about the capitalist society where the industry owners take the maximum profits. So that is a social order which is established not only through violence, but it's a kind of ideology, because people accepted this fact. Now, ideological state apparatuses. Now, what is repressive state apparatus? Repressive state apparatuses are, the orders which are established by force, by exerting power and through coercion. So, ruling class in RSA, ruling class tries to dominate the working class. Now, here the agents are government, courts, police, armed forces, and so on. So, things are coerced into the society. Now, here you can find the timely intervention to politics in favor of interest of the ruling class and repressing the subordinate social classes as required, either by violent or non-violent coercive means. So here things are imposed forcefully on the society, on the on the common people mass. But ideological state apparatuses, as the name suggests, it works through ideology. Through so these apparatuses are legitimized through ideology. So the institutions which generate ideologies through which things are established in the society. So things are internalized through exertion of ideologies. Now, late capitalism, which is another important term. Now, this term refers to the form of capitalism after Second World War. So, after Second World War, the form of capitalism changed rapidly, significantly. So, this would basically refer to the post Second World War capitalism. Now, in post Second World capitalism or in late capitalism, there are multinational corporates, culture industry, processes of globalization, and free market. So, market after Second World War became free, open, more wide, globalized. It is very broad. It is broader than capitalism in post Second World War. So, Marxist theory of culture. Now, let us come to that point. Culture in Marxist theory. So in Marxist theory, you need to locate culture as a part of superstructure, which is not intrinsic to base. Base is constituted of uh, production, the means of production and relations of production. Means of production, industries, labors, and relations of production, basically market. So these would constitute the base. In superstructure, uh, you have religion, you have you have culture as well. So you will look at culture in superstructure, not in base. In Marxist theory, so we have some important terms related to that. You have cultural capital, dominant, residual, and emergent culture, and culture industry. So let us talk about these things. So what is cultural capital? This term was coined by Pierre Bourdieu. So cultural capital would refer to a set of symbolic elements like skills, tastes, clothing, mannerism, and others that one acquires by being a part of a particular social class. So, if you belong to a particular social class, then you would have certain skills, taste, clothing, mannerisms, and all that. So, these would refer to your cultural capital. And so, this is a kind of social asset of a person, like education, intellect, style of speech, and all that. So, just let us take an example. So, if you're a Bengali, and then you would generally follow some Bengali cultural aspects. So you would speak Bengali language, you would have certain tastes which are Bengali like. So these these aspects, these cultural aspects, these would be your cultural assets, and these would be called you know uh, cultural capital. As a whole, altogether this would be called as cultural capital. So three types of cultural capital: embodied cultural capital, uh, the next one is objectified cultural capital, and the third one is institutionalized cultural capital. So embodied cultural capital is acquired over time and not transmissible. For example, someone born in a Brahmin family acquires cultural capital. So if you're born in a Bengali family or Brahmin family or whatever, so you'd have certain cultural aspects which would belong to that particular class or community. It is not transmissible to another, to another individual who belongs to another community or class. Objectified cultural capital, which is gained by owing wealth or property, showing off symbolically the possession of economic capital like car, branded shirts, and all that, and or cultural capital by having a limited edition of pen, J.K. Rowling signed Harry Potter series, and all that. So that cultural capital, it is related to owing wealth or property. So if you try to show off that you have capital by buying a car, by buying a costly car, by having a limited edition of pen, costly pen, so when you gather that cultural capital by buying something, by owing something, then it would be called as objectified cultural capital. And institutionalized cultural capital, so academic qualifications and credentials. Suppose you read in IIT, so you are an IITian, so you have gained that, you have gained with your merit and labor and all that. So that is institutionalized cultural capital, because this cultural capital you have got it because you are a member of that institution. Raymond Williams would refer to three cultural capitals: dominant, residual, and emergent culture. Now, what is dominant culture? That you see, that is visible, that is established practices at present. What is residual culture? Some cultural aspects belonging to the past but still hanging around. So, these would be residual culture. And emergent culture. What is emergent culture? The new cultural ideas that are emerging, that are being created constantly in a society by a group of individuals. So, that is emergent culture. So, that would come in future for sure. Now, what is culture industry? Culture industry is coined by Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer in Dialectic of Enlightenment. So, according to them, culture functions as a kind of industry. So, this creates the needs and products, produces false consciousness that this need can be mitigated by the corporation's standard products or standardization. Audiences are passive or inert consumers. So the culture products like TV programs, radio shows, advertisements, and posters, and all that, these would, these culture products would generate generate kind of necessity, generate the market, and would mitigate the demand as well. So it would generate the demand and mitigate the demand as well. So false consciousness is created by showing advertisement. Suppose you see an advertisement of a Coca-Cola product, so you might desire to buy that product because that's a new kind of product which is launched by the Coca-Cola company. So when you desire to buy that product by seeing the advertisement, so the advertisement is creating the demand for this product, and you are the consumer. So the false consciousness is created by this advertisement that shows that this product is exquisite and you must try it. So this is how this culture products would create the demand and mitigate the demand as well. So culture functions, this cultural paradigm functions as a kind of industry. These are the references. Thank you.